And going to you now.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. This is Meteorologist Dustin coming in for Grayson County weather. I just wanted to do a little bit of a discussion and breakdown for the severe weather threat today and tomorrow. We've got some pretty active weather we're watching, so I wanted a chance to do a live stream to kind of give everybody the heads up on what we're expecting, what we can be looking forward to, and it's going to be pretty busy. So I just wanted a chance to kind of tell everybody here directly what we're looking at. So right now, it's pretty warm outside. It's a warm, muggy afternoon, and looking at the radar right now for the Grayson County area specifically, it's the radar is pretty clear in our local area. We're mainly watching off to our west at this particular time. We've got some rain showers and storms out there that we're expecting to move in. So as we zoom out and kind of look at that area I was talking about to our west, you can see, a severe thunderstorm watch across parts of like the Boot Heel of Missouri, northern Arkansas, nosing into like far western Kentucky and western Tennessee. That's the activity that we're watching for this evening. If you've tuned in and caught any of my posts on my professional page, or if you caught my broadcast last night, one of the things we talked about today was the cap in place and what we think, how we think that's going to come into play. And if you don't know, like a cap tends to suppress storm development until you get like the strongest updraft. So in this case, you can see that we do have kind of a broad cluster of showers and storms. The lead cluster, you can see they're moving into western Kentucky. It was producing severe weather, but over the past hour or so has kind of weakened and diminished quite a bit, with the southern line becoming dominant. So overall, I think the severe risk in the Grayson County area is fairly limited this afternoon. I'm not saying we won't see a few pop-up storms ahead of this activity, but I think that as this wave moves through during the overnight, that's when our first severe weather potential will really ramp up. And then if any storms do develop today, the main threat would be large hail, possibly some gusty winds. There's a non-zero tornado chance, but again, the stuff we're watching today is much more conditional. I'm not really as worried. We're going to be watching it, but I'm not really as worried about today as I am tomorrow. Tomorrow, I think, is much more of the real deal, and I'm a lot more concerned with tomorrow, specifically tomorrow afternoon, but we are expecting multiple rounds of storms. Looking at current temperatures from the Kentucky Mesonet, which it seems like it's maybe lagging a little bit, but there we go. So fun fact, when I was in college, I actually worked as a research assistant for the Kentucky Mesonet, so I'm always happy to see their data out there. But looking at the current temperatures, we've generally been in the 80s across much of central Kentucky today. It's a warm day. You've been outside, you feel it. So despite all the severe weather potential, it's been a pretty nice day. Unfortunately, that heat and humidity is it's going to come into play for that busy day tomorrow. Part of the reason is that we've got basically summer-like temperatures with what we would consider like winter-like wind fields. So the wind fields aloft are really strong. So that means you've got hot, humid air at the surface, strong wind fields aloft, and that tends to come together in an explosive way. But right now, it's just giving us kind of a summer-like afternoon.
You want me to put the humidity and dew points on there?
You can pull up the dew point real quick, yeah.
Okay.
So one of the main severe ingredients is moisture. So I thought it would be good to look at the dew points here. At this point in the season, moisture isn't really a question. We usually expect sufficient moisture. In this case, you've got dew points well in the 60s, even some 70s popping up, all the way up into like Illinois, Indiana. Across Kentucky, plenty of moisture, and that rich moisture that's in place, it's been kind of pulling ahead of the front. So it's not only high humidity, high dew point, but it's deep as well. So that's really helping to fuel the severe storm threat and will contribute to very strong instability tomorrow. And in the meantime, making it feel a little extra muggy outside. And if we've got the, we can go ahead to the severe weather graphics here if we've got them. Perfect, there we go. So yes, here's the severe weather outlook from our colleagues at the Storm Prediction Center. This is for today. And they have, basically like the western 2/3 of Kentucky and a slight risk. If you'd followed my post or anything, we've all kind of been expecting the greater risk to be up to our north, and you can kind of see that enhanced risk barely showing up on the page. But for our area, they've got us in a slight risk, which is a 2 out of 5. And I've said before, that doesn't mean slightly severe storms. If any storms do develop and are severe today, they're severe storms. But just given the lack of confidence and the fact that we don't think storm coverage will be that great this afternoon, they've gone with the slight risk, and that includes a 2% tornado chance across Grayson County, mostly, with a slightly higher 5% chance to our west. And again, this doesn't mean this is the total percentage chance of a tornado. That's confusing sometimes, but this is relative to your point. So a 2% chance, that means a 2% chance of a tornado within so many miles of your location. So it doesn't mean that there's only a 2% chance of a tornado. It means there's a 2% chance of a tornado within 50 miles of your location. But again, tomorrow is the much more concerning day, and you can see the threat today really focused just to our west and north. Wind outlook is pretty similar. That would be the wind and hail outlook really would be the greater threats with any storms today. We might get some strong to severe wind gusts and some large, potentially large hail. And again, this is what we would consider a conditional threat, which has been really tricky to kind of emphasize, that like we might not see any severe storms at all. But if we do, most likely the hazards would be hail and wind. Now here's for tomorrow, which I've been kind of, preaching all week, that I think tomorrow is, unfortunately, it looks like a legitimate severe weather event. If you followed me any amount of time, I don't like to hype things up. I don't like to be very aggressive in my wording. I try to be fairly subdued and conservative when forecasting, and then, only, be aggressive when I feel like I need to. And unfortunately, tomorrow looks like one of those days. And the Storm Prediction Center agrees. They've got, you can see the broad red area. That's a moderate risk, which is a 4 out of 5. They've got the broad moderate risk for most of western central Kentucky, pretty much all the way towards the Lexington area, and then all of Kentucky in a fairly substantial severe risk altogether. But again, the greatest corridor is that moderate risk area, where we think multiple rounds of significant thunderstorms will develop tomorrow. I'll get into the timing and specifics in a minute, but again, that moderate risk is mainly for significant severe wind gusts, which could be 70, 80, 90 mile per hour gusts. And of course, large to very large hail and tornadoes. So it's an all hazards event that we're expecting. And here's the tornado outlook for tomorrow. Again, basically, most of the state of Kentucky in that yellow area. And so that yellow area with the black dashes in it, we would call that like a hatched outlook. So the yellow area means a 10% chance of a tornado within 25 miles of a point. And then when you have those black hatches in it, those little dashed lines, that means that's the chance of a significant tornado. So that yellow area that you're seeing means a 10% chance of a significant tornado within 25 miles of any point in that area. That's a significant deal. That's a pretty substantial thing. Anytime you start to see 10% areas, that's already a big deal. When you start seeing them hatched for significant tornadoes, that's not what you want to see. That doesn't mean everybody will see a tornado, but that is a very real concern tomorrow. There's some meteorological factors that are really kind of catching our eye, so to speak, that are the reason we've all of us, regardless of where we work, have all been kind of upping our severe probabilities for this event. So as I said, it was a primarily wind-driven outlook. That was, the confidence in the tornadoes is a little lower. It's hard to say for sure where tornadoes were formed, but we do generally expect significant wind across most of the state, and that was the trigger point for the SPC to go ahead and increase to the moderate risk now, as opposed to waiting until tomorrow. And you can see significant severe wind basically expected across all of Kentucky. When you see that red area like that, that's 30 to 44% chance of significant wind within 25 miles of a point. So I mean, that's at that point you're basically expecting severe wind across the entire region. And these are some of the briefing pages that are sent out to partners and clients, kind of just hitting on some of the points that we just talked about. But it talks about storms developing off to our southwest, which is what we were looking at the beginning. The timing tonight, they've got 7 p.m. to midnight. I think that's pretty reasonable. I do think round one for tomorrow starts after midnight, so these events kind of run together a little bit. But again, this is for the first round, and as we go ahead to Friday, we can go ahead and look at Friday. We've talked about Thursday enough. So tomorrow, just to kind of break down some of the things here and then some of what I'm thinking, probably between like the 5 to 10 a.m. time frame, that's when I'm expecting round one. And again, to emphasize, I think there are 2 to 3 rounds of severe storms tomorrow. So I think round one is going to be between like 5 to 10 a.m. And unfortunately, that's when you're going to have morning commutes, people going to school, people going to work. We don't like to see that, but that's just the way it is. And I think at that point, in the early morning storms, we're looking at probably large hail being the main threat. Just meteorologically, the surface air is a little cooler at that point, so storms are usually, tornado threats are usually limited at that point. So we're probably talking, storms producing large hail early in the morning. As those storms clear out, the atmosphere should be able to quickly destabilize again, unfortunately. And by early to mid-afternoon, we'll have probably strong to extreme instability in place. It should recover no problem. And we'll have strong to extreme instability in place with very strong wind shear as well. And by early to mid-afternoon, we expect explosive development, across western Kentucky, southern Illinois, just the region at large. Explosive storm development with a mix of supercells, which a supercell is like a storm with a rotating updraft. It's like the updraft itself is already rotating. So a mix of isolated supercell storms and then a few clusters of storms as well. And this complicates the hazard forecasting. But just to keep it simple, every storm tomorrow can produce all severe hazards, meaning wind, hail, and tornadoes. We do think it's going to be a mixed mode, like I said, with some isolated supercells ahead of the line, and then one or more lines forming behind them pushing through the region. So again, round one early in the morning, 5 to 10 a.m. Round two is you get into like early to mid afternoon, and then I'll hit on the severe thunderstorm categories here. But then round three tomorrow, which is a little more questionable, because at that point, we don't know how worked over the atmosphere will be. But round three tomorrow, I think we might see some severe weather into the overnight hours as well. So we might see what we would call like a quasi-linear convective system, just a big line of storms. I think we'll see a big line of storms develop off to our northwest, and then also push into the Grayson County area, probably in the like 10 p.m. to midnight range. So again, 5 to 10 a.m. and then probably 3 to 6, 3 to 7 for round two, and then probably 9 or 10 to midnight for round three if it holds together. On this graphic, though, they've got the start time of the highest severe threat. Again, we think the afternoon round is going to be the significant round, or the most significant round. That's when you're going to want to pay attention to all this, but you're really going to want to be aware during the afternoon, because that's when we think the greatest chance for the most significant wind, some possibly strong tornadoes, and of course, large to very large hail, all possible during the afternoon tomorrow. And then he pulled up the severe thunderstorm categories just a second ago, so I just want to kind of briefly hit on those. I emphasize this all the time because they can be complicated to understand. And in fact, if you follow, my forecast, generally speaking, I just put out my own graphics, and it's not because I disagree with them. I tend to agree with them, but I feel like it can be hard sometimes to communicate. Sometimes it's hard to get the messaging right. But just in this case, because it is a higher risk, it's a moderate. A moderate risk typically means like widespread severe thunderstorms likely, with long-lived, widespread, and intense storms, strong tornadoes possible, widespread wind damage, and destructive hail. So those are the criteria you look for a moderate risk. Some people asked about a high risk. Will a high risk be issued tomorrow? Possible. It's certainly on the table, but if you really want my honest opinion, I don't think it changes a whole lot. Whether it's a moderate risk or a high risk, that's not going to change a whole lot. Like if they upgrade it to a high risk, it doesn't mean the forecast has changed much. It will really just indicate that like the confidence is increased a little more in a significant event. But we already think it's going to be a significant event. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about the categories because they can be kind of confusing. So the bottom line is, regardless of what category it is, we're expecting significant severe weather across western and central Kentucky tomorrow, and you're going to want to be weather aware. Like it doesn't matter what the words are. That's the bottom line to that. You can skip ahead, Cody. I just wanted to hit that real quick. Okay. Okay. Another thing that kind of often goes underlooked or overlooked a little bit. We do have a slight risk for excessive rainfall. You heard us talk about this when we had the major flooding events recently. We talked about the excessive rainfall outlooks. You can think of this similar to like the Storm Prediction Center's severe storm outlook, except they're specifically forecasting excessive rainfall or flooding. We're not looking at like we're not looking at like a 1 in a 1,000 year event like we get every other month down here now. But with a stalled warm front across the region, there will be a warm front stalled kind of roughly along the Ohio River, and storms will be kind of riding along that warm front. So you will get areas that will get repeated heavy rainfall, tonight and tomorrow. And because of that, I mean, you're going to get, very heavy rainfall rates, and then you're going to get those rainfall rates hitting the same areas over and over. So localized flooding, it will be an issue. I don't think we're talking like, we're not talking catastrophic, 15 inches of rain again, excuse me, but localized, flooding will be an issue. So if you're in like a poor drainage area, if you're in an area, is a flood prone area, places like that, some urban areas, you might see some localized flooding. So you're going to just want to keep an eye on the water levels where you're at, and turn around, don't drown, all the cliches we use. So, just keep an eye out for that and be safe when it comes to the flood buildup tomorrow. And this is a good graphic here. I'm glad he threw this in here. One of the things, as it says, thunderstorms can escalate quickly. Sometimes, we see these large lines of storms that form 200 miles to our west, and they slowly move in, and we watch them for hours. I don't know if we're going to get that luxury tomorrow. I don't think we're going to. We might with the later, the late night storms, we might. But for some of the afternoon storms, you might see conditions deteriorate pretty quickly, because when you get these explosive updrafts that go up, you might see, bubbling cumulus clouds in the sky, and then 20 minutes later you got a supercell on your hands. So it is important to kind of stay watch the sky, but also just kind of stay updated with like any watches and warnings and what things are looking like in your area. Don't necessarily think that just because there's not a storm on you right now that there won't be, because these isolated storms, you can go from pretty clear conditions to a pretty rough time in a matter of minutes. So you're going to want to kind of stay up to date on that tomorrow, just because things can and will change pretty quickly. And here's the 4-day forecast, kind of looking ahead of this. Showers and thunderstorms lingering Saturday morning, kind of off and on through the day. And then as we get later on, still some lingering rain chances through the rest of the weekend. But generally speaking, still kind of hanging on to fairly warm temperatures. We'll see a little bit of a drop, behind this cold front, but all in all, still fairly spring-like with, I guess we're kind of transitioned from the summer-like day to day back to spring for a little bit, with isolated showers and the temperatures in the 70s, maybe a few low 80s, but generally temperatures in the upper 70s, lows in the 50s and 60s. So pretty spring-like. And if there aren't any more graphics, I wanted to kind of just briefly hit the meteorological, kind of some of the reasoning before I hop off here. So kind of the way this is set up for anybody who's like interested. Right now we're watching. We've got a front kind of pushing into the region, and that's helping to spark up some of the storms that we're seeing to our west. That front's going to stall out, like I said, kind of near the Ohio River. And then so what's going to happen is tomorrow you'll get, as kind of this upper level jet pushes into the region, that's going to help spark storms all along that front. And they'll take off and kind of ride the front off to the east northeast. And south of that front, which is where we will be in the warm sector, south of that front, you're just going to have this moisture and humidity and instability just continuing to build throughout the day, fueling these storms. And that's kind of what's providing us with a very strongly unstable environment. That upper level jet's giving us very strong wind fields. And then all in all, it's a recipe for like a high and severe episode, which is, not to scare anybody, that is, these are kind of textbook things we look for. And that's why we've kind of had our attention focused so closely on it. But just, kind of stay tuned, follow along. You can follow me at Meteorologist Dustin Knight if you just want direct information. Obviously, our colleagues, the local weather service office in Louisville, that's a great resource. Just follow along with, meteorologists you trust to stay up to date with the weather. And we'll get through this like we always do. It's going to be a bumpy ride tomorrow, but we'll get through it like we always do. And if Cody doesn't have anything, I'm good to go. If you have any questions, again, please reach out to, feel happy to reach out to me at Meteorologist Dustin Knight on Facebook, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. But if Cody doesn't have anything, I'm going to sign off here. I just wanted to take a chance to update everybody a little bit.
I'm good. I want to thank y'all for tuning in.
All right,
for the live stream, and then thank Dustin Knight for hopping on here and talking about tomorrow's setup.
Hey, thank you for having me. Thanks everybody for tuning in.
Welcome.